Thanks.
Okay, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
So anyway, in my background, I was an academic at universities in the US in medical genetics and biology. I started a lot of activism groups in the US, and then I came back to Palestine in 2008, where we set up other groups, including this Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability, which has been in operation now for 10 years, and we'll talk about, just give you a little bit of background on Palestine and what we are about. What is this? People ask me, why do you all have troubles there? Why is this such a troublesome part of the world? And I say, no, we're not troublesome. We had some issues, but those are new issues and they're not part of our heritage. So they asked me to prove that. And this is in medical genetics, which is my field. I say taking patient history. And taking patient history means you know who the patient is, whether they've had difficulties before. And this you do even before you start to discuss the current problem that the patient has. So who is this patient? The patient is this geographic area called Palestine. It's an intersection of continents where actually humans migrated out of Africa to the rest of the world through Palestine about 100,000 years ago, where humans evolved in Africa and then moved to the rest of the world through this land bridge between Eurasia and Africa. And this land bridge is so important now, even birds from Europe and Asia, they migrate annually, going back and forth. Every year, 500 million birds migrate through our country. It's a very rich country in biodiversity, habitats, nature, wild flowers, wild animals. We are a beautiful country that has more plant species in tiny Palestine, 27,000 square kilometers. We have more plant species than the whole of England. So it is a very rich and wealthy country. It's never been a desert, by the way. It is now becoming a desert thanks to colonization, but I'll come to that. The proof that it has always been rich country is that it's actually part of the Fertile Crescent, where humans first developed agriculture, where our ancestors about 12,000 years ago domesticated plants and animals, plants like olives and wheat and barley and chickpeas and lentils and dates, etc. And also animals like goats and sheep and donkeys and camels. This is in the Fertile Crescent. When people did that, as I said, about 12,000 years ago or so, beginning 12,000 years, but the process lasted a few thousand years. When they did that, of course, that gave them time on their hand to do things like invent philosophy, religions, languages, ideas like that, you know, how to think about the gods and what they mean. And so many evolution of religions came from our ancestors here. But even the alphabet that you use, the ABCs, basically come from us. The A from Aleph, which is the bull with the two horns. The B is from Beit, or a house. The K is from Kaf, and so on. And these ancestors of ours are depicted by the Egyptian hieroglyphics and by Mesopotamian reliefs, as you see in the middle, as always people with rich resources, never people that are poor or anything else. These are who the people are. You can see what they look like. Or here, indigenous people of Palestine. The woman, the right, is from Bethlehem. So if you want to know what Mary and Jesus looked like, that's how they would have looked like. This is my village of Beit Sahur about 100 years ago. This is my grandmother walking down the steps of the old house. Most of the Palestinians trace their ancestries to Canaanites, but we did have some additional admixtures over the hundreds, thousands of years in the past. And of course, religions, as I said, evolved here. And so there was Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Samaritan, Baha'i, Druze, etc. This picture is from about 100 years ago, when religious and secular leaders got together to object to the Balfour Declaration, which is the declaration that the Great Britain decided to promise the Zionists a homeland in Palestine, Palestine basically. So why did these religious and secular leaders that you see gathered here of all backgrounds, why did they object to the Zionist project and the Balfour Declaration? Well, the answer is in the picture. You know, Palestine was multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious society. Somebody has the microphone open. If you could mute yourself, please. So, you know, to change a country that's diverse, that's pluralistic like this, and make it a Jewish state is obviously objectionable to the local people. That's what we call colonialism. So where did this, so that, okay, now I mentioned if you look at the, you know, patient as an analogy of a medical condition, you say the patient was, this is the history of the patient before the current illness. So we want to talk about the current illness, but what is, has the patient had similar episodes in the past? And I would say the closest we had in Palestine, a similar episode to this was Crusaderism, when Europeans came here with the idea of making this country part of Christendom and all Catholic. Basically, this is an idea that they developed for political purpose. That had nothing to do with Catholicism or Christianity. But this was a few hundred years ago, and it was an idea that came from Europe, similar to this idea that also came from Europe, called Zionism. Similar to Crusaderism, it's so thought to transform the country from a poly-cultural, poly-religious, multi-religious, whatever, society to make it one thing or another. And the idea originated with the British. As you can see, this Lieutenant Colonel George Goller, who was governor of South Australia, was hired by the British Empire to study the situation and create a movement. The British Parliament adopted the program in 1847, allocated some money for it. It was a program for establishment of Jewish colonies in Palestine, as you see. And then they went about convincing enough Jews and enough Christians that this is good for them. And they did succeed to convince some Jews and some Christians. They developed ideas of Christian Zionism, for example, and Jewish Zionism. Theodor Herzl and his father were both Jewish Zionists. And this is the idea. The idea is, let's make this country a Jewish state. Everybody at the time knew what it means to make it a Jewish state. It means that the natives, you have to deal with the problem that 97% of the indigenous people here were not Jewish. 97% were Muslim, Christian, Baha'i, Druze, etc. How are you going to take a country that's 97% non-Jewish and make it a Jewish state? Well, everybody knew that this means ethnic cleansing or genocide or both. And if you want to read about what happened in 1948, for example, you can read Ilan Pape's book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. That's when over 500 Palestinian villages and towns were depopulated. You can see them in the red dots on the map on the right. And Israel was created in place of these villages, basically. Then Israel expanded in 1967 to occupy the rest of Palestinian land, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And this shrinking of the land continues to this day. And this shrinking map of Palestine actually came about, the first version of it was drawn in 1998 by my son when he was 13 years old. When he saw the shrinking map of the United States, what became known as the United States, of course, indigenous land for many, many nations, indigenous people. Same thing happened in other countries like Australia and South Africa and many others. In South Africa, for example, the blacks were relegated to about 11.5% of the land of South Africa. In our case, it's actually worse. It's only 8.3% that's left for us, but that's changing and decreasing every year. So soon it will be 0% if we allow them to do this. This is what they call displacement settler colonialism. This is, or etiology of the disease. What is the problem? The problem here is displacement settler colonialism. The problem here is not a religious conflict. It's not a military occupation. It's not a dispute over borders or anything like that. It's displacement settler colonialism. Why do I insist that we make the right diagnosis? Is because if we make the wrong diagnosis, we could be mistreating the patient and actually causing the death of the patient. If I have cancer and I go to a doctor and I say I have anemia and headache and problems with my lungs, you know, can you mute, please? So if I say that and the doctor says, okay, for the headache, take some aspirin, for the anemia, eat some spinach, and, you know, and for a skin rash, take some cream, this doctor would be killing me because he's trying to treat something other than the underlying etiology. Treating symptoms is not the way to go. So the symptoms are many, of course, for this disease, if you want. You are very familiar with it, of course, from where you are, and you are familiar. We are familiar with it globally in every country on earth. I don't think there was a country that was not colonized on earth or became a colonizer. Some countries did both, you know. For example, you know, Spain was colonized by the Moors and then became the largest colonizing country on earth. England was colonized by the Romans and then colonized places, as you know, like Australia and Aotearoa, which is New Zealand, became known as New Zealand. Things like that. So it's a very common phenomenon, and its symptoms are very well understood. The perception of the colonizers of themselves as civilized, as democratic, as bringing light and beauty and technology to the local people, and their perception of the local people as savages, as unworthy, as subhumans. In this case, in North America, like also equivalent to the buffaloes, which they also killed buffaloes. So it was not just a genocide of natives, but it was a genocide of buffaloes, 2 to 3 million. So we do have, each colonization has unique features, and our situation one of the unique, in the situation, let's say, of Australia, the colonizers have to be British, at least in the first 150 years or something. And in the case of some other countries, there were specific colonization patterns or conditions. In South Africa, for example, colonizers wanted to keep the indigenous people in these Bantustans as slave labor. In our case, by the way, they don't want us as slave laborers, even they want to just get rid of us, period. But another unique feature about our situation is that the colonizers do not come from one country. They have to be Jewish to be allowed to colonize. And so this sign illustrates this condition, basically. But other symptoms are similar to other colonizations. For example, the massive toll on the indigenous people. In our case, actually now it's 170,000 Palestinians killed, at least since 1948, and over 1 million injured, and over 1 million who were imprisoned. The onslaught on Gaza that you've heard about, I'm sure, Gaza Strip was occupied in 1967. 70% of its population is refugees from 1948 areas, which became what's called Israel here. I don't recognize Israel, by the way. I don't think it has a legitimacy in any shape, way, or form as a state. It's a colonizing entity. There's no such thing as Israelis. There's colonizers. But anyways, the Gaza Strip is now 2.3 million Palestinians. 70% of them are refugees or displaced people. And it's being butchered basically with massacres daily. On average, in the past, just the past 8 months, 16,000 Palestinian children were killed, 10,000 women were killed, 86,000 Palestinians were injured. 70 to 80% of buildings in Gaza were damaged or destroyed, and not just residential buildings, but also schools and hospitals, and all the universities were destroyed. The reason for that is because there are gas fields off of Gaza. That's why Gaza has been targeted for the past 2 decades since the discovery of the gas fields. Has nothing to do with Hamas, by the way, or anything else. A second reason is that Israel is planning to become an empire between the Euphrates and the Nile. And this was the original plan of Zionism in their original designs in the 19th century. And to be the connection between Asia and Europe. And Netanyahu, the prime minister, the criminal prime minister of Israel, articulated very well, even at the United Nations and also in Israeli television, as you see, that Israel will become hegemonic in the Middle East and will connect Asia to Europe to replace the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which is the initiative that already over $6 trillion were invested in it, that connects Asia from the Far East to Europe. He thinks, and his leadership in Israel think that they can do a different route from Asia to Europe. The Palestinians are basically a thorn in the side of this plan. And so that's why they had to be killed. And that's why there had to be a genocide in Gaza. And so that's why, for example, like this guy, Yoav Gallant, he says there will be no electricity, no food, no fuel, everything is closed. We are fighting animal people and we are acting accordingly. And indeed, that's what they're doing. There's starvation in Gaza. etc. Many other Israeli leaders had the same thing, basically. And Israeli soldiers acted on their commands, killing children, like this, you can see, and mass graves in Gaza. There's an ongoing genocide in Gaza, carpet bombings. This is just some list of names. I enlarged this part, which is about the Hassouna family. You can see, can you mute, please? Somebody is talking. And the Hassouna family, I list them here from age 1 to 17 because I actually know a member of the Hassouna family. But, the genocide continues. I don't want to belabor this, but these are some of the people. They are individuals. They're not just numbers, 16,000 children. Each child has a story. 152 journalists actually have been killed so far. Hospitals have been destroyed, as you see here. Mosques and churches and museums and universities were demolished, bulldozed. Colonialism is also harmful for the environment. Settler colonialism is one of the environmental threats that we face, including, these other ones like climate change and habitat destruction and pollution. But all of these work in synergy. For example, if I talk about war as a tool of colonization, because obviously, the Indian wars, as they used to call them in the US, these are wars of ethnic cleansing. That's what they are. And so they're not real wars between armies, but wars that are happening now that are associated with colonialism, including this one, are devastating to our environment. I give you an example. Israel, in bombing Gaza, used more jet fuels in the past 8 months, produced more greenhouse gases than the country of Italy produced in a whole year. From everything, from automobiles, everything else. So jet fuel alone is a big greenhouse gas emitter. And of course, the pollution of the bombs. So there's a lot of intersection between these issues. And colonization by itself is environmentally catastrophic. For example, when Israel was created and destroyed all these villages and towns that I showed you, they bulldozed the lands around them, uprooting millions and millions of indigenous trees like oaks and hawthorns and carobs, and also domestic trees like olives and figs and almonds. And they planted pine trees in their place. Problem with pine trees and monoculture is devastating for the environment, for biodiversity. But also pine trees in a dry climate are susceptible to fires. And actually there's fires ongoing as I'm speaking with you in West Jerusalem. And in this case, this is a couple of years ago when the fire subsided. You can see after the fire consumed these pine trees that they have planted, it exposed the terraces that Palestinians have built. Can the moderator please mute everybody? Because there's noise that keeps coming. Mute the other people. There's diversion of the waters of the Jordan River basin from Lake Tiberias to the west. This dried up the Jordan River basin, and that's why I said Israel took a fertile country and is making it a desert. By diversion of the water of the Jordan River, we have desertification in the Jordan Valley. This is what the river looked like before and after. It used to flow at 1,350 million cubic meters per year. Now it's 20 million cubic meters per year. It's basically stream, and near the Dead Sea, it's barely 1.2 meters wide. There's the pillage of our resources to deny them to us, the indigenous people. For example, water. This is not because Israel needs water, it's because they want to deny us so that we are thirsty and we leave the country. And to some extent, this strategy works, of course, in ethnic cleansing. When you starve people, they have to feed their children or whatever. This figure from Visualizing Palestine shows there's actually more rainfall in Ramallah than there is in London. But unlike London, where the water goes into the water aquifer and then it's used by the people of London or surroundings, in our case, the water is stolen from the aquifers and is used partially by settlers or partially thrown away. 1, 2. Stop share here. And so everybody muted, please. Or reduce the noise around you. If there are people in the room where you are, please ask them to not make noise, because it's really bothersome to other people.
Everyone is off and muted as they enter, and I'm keeping an eye on them.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I will actually speed up a little bit. This is next to me here, Jabal Abu Ghnaim, which is a hill that was forested before 1997, and the state of Israel, under the leadership of the same prime minister now, Netanyahu, the Hitler of the modern era, decided to make it a Jewish-only colony. So you can see what it looked like before at the top and what it looks like after. And there's decline in biodiversity in the Bethlehem region. There's destruction of our trees and our habitats and our agricultural lands. There is a lot of damage. These are all symptoms of colonization, and we can talk endlessly about symptoms, but I'm sure you are interested in talking about solutions and outcomes. So what is the outcomes? There's only 3 possible scenarios. There's the Algeria model, where 1.5 million Algerians were killed. Some say 3 million Algerians killed. And 1 million colonial settlers moved to Europe. I don't say back to Europe because some of them were 6, 7, 8 generations in Algeria. Some of them have never seen France before, and they had to move to France. This is one possible scenario. Other scenario is the genocide model, as happened in the US and Australia, what became known as the US and Australia, colonizing names, by the way. And the other, is the coexistence model, where descendants of the colonized and descendants of the colonizers live in one country. This happened in most of the world, 160 or 170 countries, like all of South America, Central America, Caribbean islands, etc. And of course, in North America, Mexico and Canada, South Africa, all of Asia, all of Europe essentially had them. If that's the outcome, the third outcome is the most likely model to happen here. There's no fourth outcome, by the way. If that is what's likely to happen, the question then is the therapy. How do we accelerate arriving at that? It's not, by the way, kumbaya, happiness kind of solution. I mean, there's always problems, and it varies by country. For example, Mexico is certainly different than Brazil, Brazil, there is still, it's not quite coexistence because the colonizers like Bolsonaro still want to destroy the lives of indigenous people in the Amazon and destroy the Amazon forests. But in Mexico, you have intermarriage, and you cannot even tell who's native and who's not, who's of Spanish ancestry or something. There are still some pockets of pure native people in Mexico. But anyways, it varies in terms of outcome and what happens, like in Northern Ireland, South Africa, whatever. But it is what it is. It's at least not model number one and model number two, which involve basically both mass killings. That leaves how to accelerate arriving at that third model, and that involves resistance. And we, as Palestinians, of course, resist because it's an existential struggle for us. And I wrote a book about popular resistance in Palestine, history of hope and empowerment, that talks about, hundreds of forms of resistance. We've tried everything in the book, by the way. We are one of the most innovative people in terms of resistance. We tried the actions that were tried later by Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi. We tried them long before these people. We're talking about the late 19th century, early 20th century, for example. Again, you can read my book if you're interested in this subject. But my thoughts about this, very briefly, and when I sent the title, suggested title, I wanted to also explain why our struggle is very pivotal for the world community. So, but before that, I want to tell you about our institute here, the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability, because it is a form of resistance. Its vision is sustainable human and natural communities. We do research, education, conservation, community service. That's a form of resistance. Our motto is respect for ourselves, for others, and for nature. I have to be in that order, by the way. Respecting ourselves is empowerment. Respecting others, regardless of their religion or background or whatever, is important. And then respect for nature. This is some of our staff and volunteers in their work. We have animal rehabilitation unit. We have a food garden, community garden. We produce some food products. We have a community garden for even the refugees can come and plant things. We have children program. Today we had 4 groups of children come to the museum. We give them workshops, tours of the Museum of Natural History, the Botanic Garden, etc. We work with them to show them how they can recycle trash, how to appreciate nature and land. We have a Museum of Natural History, including this cultural heritage section. This is just some of our work with children. This is our work with women, empower them, selling their own products, making their own products from natural ingredients like plants, etc. We welcome international volunteers from all backgrounds. We had volunteers from 45 countries. And you can see the volunteers here enjoying picking olives, making apricot jam, working in the garden, or just sitting and knowing each other. These volunteers in the upper right-hand corner built us this biogas unit and cooking together, eating together, etc. And this is what the Institute, the museum will look like in a year or two. We'll have new facilities, new building. I'm still collecting funds for this. We have 70% of what we need, so any kind of donation is welcome. I end with this picture because I like it, since I'm speaking to you from Bethlehem, where Jesus is born. This is a depiction of Mother Mary and Jesus. My family is Palestinian Christian family. And the picture on the right is from a woman from Gaza in front of her demolished home, having lost a lot of her relatives and family with her child. You can see, again, if you want to know what Mary and Jesus looked like in real physical forms, that's what they would look like. This is our website. And here I just want to make a few comments while I show you pictures of me being arrested a few times. Why should you care about Palestine is a good question to ponder. Well, why is this important? Well, one thing is, again, this land is holy to many religions, Baha'i, Christian, Muslim, Jewish. It's considered holy land for all of those religions. So certainly more than half the globe is attached to this land. That's number one. Number two is what is happening here has impact on all the globe nowadays, because as you see already, Israel is planning to become an empire, and it's competing even with China in terms of connecting Asia and Europe. And Israel is already the 5th strongest army in the world, and the 4th or 5th largest exporter of weapons and security-related equipment in the world. That's their aim is not just limited to Palestine. Their aim is hegemony around the world. And the fact that in the US, the Israel lobby controls US elections and make you choose between two Zionists, Trump and Biden, neither of them, by the way, would reach the level of becoming a candidate, let alone a president, without the approval of the Zionist lobby. All of this means that Israel's affairs is global affairs, if you want. Palestine affairs is global affairs. Just today, I heard that they unseated Jamal Bowman, black from New York congressman, in the primary, Democratic primary, and he won very clearly the primary earlier last time around, but now the Zionist lobby went after him because he spoke about human rights of Palestinians and about ending the genocide. So in the primary, they put more money. They were spending $17,000 a day to unseat, no, $17,000 an hour to unseat him, and they succeeded. Money speaks. So that's a second reason why it's important. And the third reason is because the Zionist leadership is lunatic, and they're willing to lead the world into a global war thinking that they will win it. So they're pushing for a war with Iran and with Lebanon and with other places. In fact, as I speak, the defense minister of Israel is in the US egging for a war on Lebanon and Iran. The problem with wars that start regional and become global, we had 3 of those in the last 150 years, starting with the Crimean War in the mid-19th century, and then the First World War and the Second World War, as they call them. The problem is with those other 3, you can have winners and losers. But in this coming global war, and I give it a 60% chance of happening, there will not be human winners and losers. There will be only one winner, by the way, and that's cockroaches, because they are resistant to radiation, and they will survive the nuclear blasts that humans are inflicting on each other. This is why I think those three reasons are why I think people should take seriously what's happening, the genocide that's happening. And it's a very interesting genocide also, in that, you know, we've had hundreds of genocides in human history. I mean, you know, when Japan occupied, you know, Manchuria and all of this stuff, and you know, and you can talk about what happened in the Second World War, the Armenian Holocaust also in the First World War, and Rwanda and the Tutsis, and Germany and Namibia, and the King of Belgium, Leopold, genocide in the Congo. All of these are history of human genocide that we should all be ashamed that we are human beings, because we have this history. But what is unique about this genocide? This genocide is broadcast live. You cannot say, I didn't know. Everybody can see it live. People are actually recording their own killing because everybody has these phones with cameras and connected to internet. So this is unusual. And the second thing about this genocide that's unusual is that it's being perpetuated not by one government. I repeat, it's not being perpetuated by one government. It's perpetuated by a number of governments, including the US government. The US government is a full partner in this genocide. Yes, with boots on the ground too, but also with the weapons that they supply to Israel to commit the genocide, like 2,000-ton bombs, etc. So this is kind of unique, that you have England, you have France, you have Belgium, you have Australia, you have the US. Ironically, all of them previous colonial powers supporting this genocide. So I think this makes it relevant and important. And I will leave you with this quote from from the Johannesburg meeting of dozens of countries, who said that we are inspired by the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which undertakes to eliminate colonialism, neo-colonialism, apartheid, Zionism, and to dismantle all forms of discrimination, period. I think that's what we aim for as humans. That's what we should do. And I will urge you to do this. And there are, as you know, people are in the streets in the millions. You know, you've seen this. You know, this is in Yemen, you know, where 10 million people went out into the streets. These are pictures from Gaza. Okay, I'll stop sharing now and take questions. I'm sorry if I took long. No, actually, you told me 50 minutes, and I'm exactly 47 minutes. Thank you. So,
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Mazin. It has been a very good recount of history and current affairs altogether. Whenever we talk about Palestine, Israel, in other parts of the world, we're really confused what's really happening. And as you said in the last bit, that this kind of genocide is kind of crazy because people are recording their own killings. That's even very sad about it. I thank you for a very healthy presentation, Professor. And now I welcome the people in the panel here to ask questions, comments, insights. You're all welcome to share in this very insightful and informative presentation from Professor Mazin. A big round of applause for Professor Mazin again. Thank you so much. It is really taking us an intellectual journey to think about our actions as humans. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. You just unmute and give us an insight.
Or maybe if they raise a hand, there's a way to raise a hand and reactions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if I may start to keep up a little bit of an insight more to this presentation, do you think there's an end to this kind of genocide, and how should that end be? As a professor there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wrote this even decades ago. I said there are two roads for humanity to pursue. And these two roads, one is to continue down the path we have been going on, which is racism, discrimination, colonialism, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. And this will lead to the end of the world as we know it, because there would not be even, just looking even at just climate change, that's a result of unfettered capitalist consumerism. That could destroy us. So if we keep down that road that we have been traveling on as humanity, we are doomed. That's one option. The other option, as I said, then I quoted from the African Charter, is we end this, we end colonialism, we have justice, we have human rights, and there's enough resources, by the way, on this planet, big, beautiful blue planet, to feed everybody, clothe everybody, have everybody living comfortably, not in multi-billion-dollar mansions or yachts of $200 million or whatever, but that's not what we want. So to have normal, healthy life, everybody will be middle class if you want. These are the two roads. Now, what's my prediction of what will happen if you want to ask that?
Yeah, what will happen? The practical part
I
of it.
would say we have a 50-50 chance, maybe even 60-40. I mentioned this earlier, 60% probability that we will have a nuclear war. I'm just being a scientist here, putting on my thinking cap and looking at all the variables and all the stuff. But I hope that we still have, even if it's 40% or 50% chance, we still have that chance. What decides the outcome is you and I. If each of us gets involved, each of us gets working, then we have a chance to save this planet and save our species. If not, you know, I'll say at least I've done my part, and you know, and cockroaches are not such a bad species, you know. So anyway, there are 3 hands now raised.
Yeah, I can see 3 hands now from Moody, Peter, and Thomas. Let's start with Moody. Welcome, Moody.
Okay. I had the privilege with the Amos Trust of visiting Mazin's Institute last year, and walking around the Botanic Garden, and it was wonderful, and to see his museum of natural history, and I heard him speak then about this diagnosis, the patient being Palestine. But I put a question to you then, and that was about what seems to be the failure of Palestinian political leadership. We have to recognize that the Hamas incursion gave Israel every excuse to devastate Gaza, and the destruction is horrendous and has shocked the world. But, you know, they were given the excuse to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, in South Africa under apartheid, there were even more horrendous atrocities committed by some factions of the resistance in South Africa. They used to even put rubber tires around people, burn them alive. In some instances, in in Northern Ireland against the British colonization. The IRA, Irish Republican Army, was recognized as a terrorist organization. They all gave excuses, of course, for the colonizers to do what they want to do. Of course, in North America, you know, the Native Americans who fought, you know, Crazy Horse and all these people, they gave excuses, if you want to use that term, to the colonizers to accelerate their colonization, if you want. But then, in any case, it didn't matter, by the way, what the natives do or don't do. The colonizers have a plan and an agenda, and the agenda will be executed regardless of what particular groups of the natives do or don't do. This is known by history. Again, I'm putting in just as a scientist, as a historian, not necessarily my preference. You know, obviously my preference is nonviolent resistance and popular resistance. I wrote a book about the subject, and I engage in it, and I was arrested over a dozen times engaging in civil disobedience. But why do they arrest me? I'm not engaged in any armed resistance. You know, it's clear. They don't care. Any kind of, even living here, as I said, they deny us water. That's not, you know, it doesn't matter what you do or don't do. They don't want you. It's as simple as that. They want a land without a people for what they call a people without a land. So they'll use whatever excuses. But in any case, colonization is violence. Let's be very clear. You cannot do colonization nicely. I cannot come to your home and land and say, hey, would you please move away so that I can colonize it? No, you have to use violence. So colonization is violence. Resistance to colonization, of course, is spectrum, a bell-shaped curve of resistance, some of it armed, some of it extreme violence, most of it nonviolent, some of it collaboration even. There were Native Americans and Palestinians who collaborated with the colonizers, and they called themselves as resistors by collaboration and by, like our current president, Abu Mazin, he said, I'm engaged in diplomatic resistance by talking to them. Okay, you know, he thinks he's diplomatic resistance, that's fine by me. Who am I to judge him? Who am I to judge Hamas? Who am I to judge anybody? I'm just describing what is there.
Yeah, I did witness the extent of the continuing oppression and injustice. I mean, in the West Bank, you know, more and more the Palestinian population are being pushed into an impossible position. The demolition of homes, the stealing of land, the settler violence, it's all happening all the time. And the rest of the world has certainly been turning a blind eye to all of that.
But the other thing the second point I want to make about this is, again, you know, if resistance is bell-shaped curve, as any statistician will tell you, even if magically you remove that tail of the curve, the small part that's armed resistance, which is 0.1% of the resistance, even if magically you remove it, the curve will renormalize. That's natural. And the third point I want to make about this is that under international law, oppressed people have a right to resist, and I quote, by any method they choose. We have a right to resist by any method we choose. Colonizers don't have a right to oppress us by any method they choose. They are colonizers, they are thieves, they are stealing our land. So they don't have rights to defend themselves, so to speak, which they always claim. Oh, we're circling the wagons against those natives who are attacking us. We don't know why they are attacking us. They're painting their faces red, they're screaming at us. We don't know why they are doing this. We don't even care why. We just are doing our thing, we're bringing civilization, whatever, and these are savages, terrorists, barbarian, whatever.
Yeah, well, the colonizers are very clever with their propaganda and with the narrative that seems to dominate too often.
Right, right.
Thank you.
Peter?
Oh, thank you. Just briefly, for context, I note that the machinery that is running this genocide, mechanical ammunition and all, it supports millions of American jobs, as the head of NATO recently pointed out again, in every congressional district. So it is a machine, it's an economy, it's a very substantial portion of the economy now. And so the question is, if it is not stopped, where is its next target? I've been predicting that the southern border of the United States around Texas will be next, but it also has been pointed out that Modi in India has been watching this with very great interest. So just, just in the larger context, this is not only about the destruction of the Palestinian people. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. It's, there's a book available in Spanish and English written in the US called Addicted to War, which is about the US and its addiction to war. The US, as Martin Luther King said once, and it's still true today, my government, and I'm a US citizen, so I can say the same thing. My government, the US government, is the biggest purveyor of violence in the world today. It's still true. It was true in the 1960s, and it's still true today. No other country has killed more people, has caused more suffering around the world than the United States government.
Our friend Howard, our late beloved Howard Richards, would point out that this is an economic structure now.
Mm-hmm. Thomas, go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for these wonderful insights. I welcome Thomas. Thomas Duffer, you're welcome.
Yeah, hello, greetings. Yeah, hello, Mazin. I've been reading your emails with great pleasure over the last few years. It's nice to meet you finally and to hear your story. So it's shocking, and I wish we had more time to really figure this out. All I can tell you is that I have been to Israel and Palestine several times, and I set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Middle East, interviewed people. I came to Bethlehem, spoke to, I didn't meet you, I don't know why, apologies about that, but I've spoken to liberal, visionary, peace-oriented people like you on both sides, Israelis and Palestinians. There are so many good people. I knew Afif Safieh, the PLO chief in London. He came to meetings I ran in Parliament. We dreamed of a dialogue being possible for peace. That's why I set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Middle East, which was modeled on the South African model. I still believe that's possible. What I don't understand, I mean, you're a realist politically, but the extreme right in Israel who killed Rabin, and in Likud, they've hijacked the state. It's against the will of the majority of the citizens of Israel, I believe. Of course, they're fed only narrow bits of information. So they don't have access. They don't see outside their bubble. They're not even allowed to watch Al Jazeera now. It's been banned. So the question is, I'm a philosopher of religious studies. I do believe there's a spiritual solution. You're from a Christian background, so am I, but I believe that Islam, Christianity and Judaism, and the Baha'is and the Druze, if we could get together, the leading intellectuals, the theologians, the visionaries, I still believe that we can make a peace treaty. I wrote an interfaith peace treaty text for people. Do you have any contact with Israelis? I mean, are you able to go to conferences and talks? how's it been for you in this? To me, it's an intellectual struggle. It's not a diplomatic struggle.
Let me start with the latter point, and I'll go back to the other points that you raised, because I do want to cover them, like the truth and reconciliation, etc. But in terms of the latter point, yes, I have a lot of contacts with many Israelis. Even my email list, which is about 55,000 people now on it, I would say at least 10% of them are Jews from around the world, and of which at least a few hundred are Israelis. So I certainly have a lot of contacts. I was also arrested. Half the times I was arrested with Israeli Jews who are standing with us in front of bulldozers that are destroying homes and destroying 2,000 or 3,000-year olive trees. So certainly we have joint struggle with them. They are fellow human beings when they choose to be. But I do want to emphasize that you're saying the majority. This I would disagree with. The majority of Israelis do not support peace. They cannot support peace. They are part of the system. And the majority of Israelis, like the majority of South African whites before apartheid, and even now, I'm sure, majority of the privileged class never supported giving up privilege. Why should they? Why would they? Logically, they don't. The latest poll actually shows that 82% of the Israeli public supports the genocide in Gaza. Literally supports genocide. And I think it's okay what Israel is doing. In fact, in another poll, the question was asked differently a few months ago. It asked, do you think the Israeli military is using enough force, too much force, or too little force? It turns out 50-some% said they are using enough force. 38% said they're not using enough force. When you add those two together, that means that was 94% of the Israeli Jewish public who thinks the Israeli military is either not using enough force, they're not killing enough civilians, or they are killing enough civilians, and that's fine. It's fine with them. This is reality. You have to realize this is our reality. Now, it doesn't mean we don't have that other minority. When I say, there's a minority that supports us and that works with us, and we work with them. Now, to go back to the third point, which is truth and reconciliation, you cannot have Truth and Reconciliation Commission created before you end colonization, you end apartheid. You did not create a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, either in Ireland or in South Africa, before the agreements were made to end what was there and create new reality. So Nelson Mandela rejected this, and Nelson Mandela rejected normalization. He stayed in jail even 10 years after they offered him normalization and truth and reconciliation, etc. He said, no, I go out of jail when you dismantle, when you promise one person, one vote. That's it. And that's what happened. And then Nelson Mandela appointed my friend Desmond Tutu, who I spoke at his church, by the way, in front of 1,500 people, Anglican church in South Africa. Nelson Mandela was tasked with heading the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but that was after the formal apartheid ended, not before. You cannot have truth and reconciliation before, because you have an oppressor up here and an oppressed people here. How could you have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission when you have such a system? There will always be hegemony then within even this Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So.
Well, thank you. Thanks. We could go on, but let somebody else ask their question.
Go
Thanks,
ahead.
Mazin.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Thomas. I remember you tried to give us an insight about this Truth and Reconciliation Commission that you did sometimes back in our webinars here, and I can recall that very well. Now, welcome, Richard Ashun. You raised your hand. Welcome.
Thank you so much for giving me the platform to also share with thought. In the first place, good afternoon to you all from Ghana. From what I've studied from the professor we just presented, I have this, that the culture, I believe in culture and its collectiveness, and then its individualisms too. So if just a block of simple advice on soldiers could have a blast of destruction, then my word is there is hope for the Palestinians, because when the coin turns, you realize that each will be thinking of him or herself. And for that time, no one would even wish to join a force to fight a battle that is not a family concern, but a real country patriotism. So, Prof, you just have faith. And as you showed the platform with Mary and Jesus, you realize what I've just said. So mine is just a short encouragement, and then to our professor. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm not sure I got a question in the comment you made. I mean, do you have a specific question you want me to answer?
Not exactly. Not exactly.
Not yes, no,
yes, not exactly.
Not at all.
He was just making a commentary and giving you hope that peace can prevail. Just hang on and try to always consider peace as an option. It's crazy. There we have Gail Presban. I can see you raised your hand. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mazin, for this in-depth overview. I have a question about U.S. as an arms exporter and then Israel as an arms exporter. Now, about the U.S. being an arms exporter, I know about it, and I just recently reviewed this book on the War Resisters League. It's for their 100th anniversary. It came out in 2023. And it said that in 1928, at the 10-year anniversary of the end of the First World War, people from War Resisters Leagues were warning everybody about the arms industry and the military-industrial complex. And that was in 1928. So that's way before the Eisenhower quote everybody likes to make. So I definitely know this is a problem. And of course, we see Netanyahu saying he wants more arms, and Biden's like, we gave you 99%. We only stopped one shipment. You know, why are you criticizing us? But the thing I want to know more about is, you also said Israel is an arms exporter. And so I know more about Israel wanting arms from the US, and I don't know as much about the arms Israel makes and where they export those arms. And so could you maybe explain a little more about that. And then if you have any insights about how we can tackle this entrenched system, because you look like anybody would say, oh, I'm making a profit selling this gun or bomb. But when you see how much destruction each thing you're making creates, it's just a net loss for humanity. So how can this industry have such a grip on people, and how can they think it's a money maker? These are questions I have.
Professor Mazin?
Yeah, it's let me just give you a little bit of background of how this developed. Israel was created by armed support from the West, arms from Czechoslovakia, France, England especially, flowed into the militias, the terrorist militias that were operating here, like the Haganah and the Irgun and so forth. But these militias thought even then in the 1920s and 1930s and 1940s, before the State of Israel was created, they thought it is not enough for us to just be importers. We have to make our own weapons so that we can be self-sustaining, number one. And number two, because we cannot rely on the West always being, lobbied by the Zionists, our friends in the West that lobbied and got us things like the Balfour and Jules Cambon Declaration to serve our interests. We cannot rely on this lobby to always be successful. So we want to make sure that we are able to build our empire. And this was the thought from 100 years ago, actually. Ben-Gurion was the most pragmatic, what he called scientific colonialism. Scientific colonialism means you think pragmatically, you think scientifically about how to colonize and how to succeed at colonization. So because of that, Ben-Gurion developed these, internal, even before the state was declared in 1948, they developed clandestine arms industries. In some cases, they put them in, ironically, in tunnels under synagogues in Tel Aviv and things like that. And so this is what they did. Then after they got the state in May 1948, that was their priority. Rabin was the chief architect of militarization, and Peres, also Shimon Peres from the Labor Party of Israel. They were assistants to Ben-Gurion on this effort. They started to develop their military technology, and it was not just military industries that are traditional. They also developed chemical, biological, and nuclear capabilities. Israel has developed nuclear capabilities starting in the 1950s. Certainly by the 1960s, they had nuclear weapons, as revealed by Mordechai Vanunu, who was working at the Dimon nuclear plant in the 1960s, and divulged the information to the Guardian newspaper with pictures and everything showing Israel's nuclear capability. The US actually tried to get Israel to sign the non-nuclear proliferation treaty, the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, I should say. The last president who tried to get them to sign this was John F. Kennedy, and he was assassinated. He also tried to get the Israel lobby to register as a foreign lobby, which it should under US law, but they refused, and Congress was bought and paid for, basically. Anyway, in any case, Kennedy was assassinated. And so that was the last president who ever wanted to get some things out of Israel to comply with international law. But part of it was about armaments for Israel. Arms manufacturing, nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons, etc. Israel then in the 1960s, especially after 1967 war, developed their technologies much more. Now, what is the technology? They're basically American weapons. That's why they are keen on getting American weapons, including the most advanced weapons like F-35s. F-35s are not given to any foreign country, and I think actually Israel is the only one to get F-35s from the US. F-35 is the most advanced fighter jet in the world. And not only that, but the US, the condition is that the Israeli military can modify, quote unquote, can modify American technology, which in all US arms exports, no country can be allowed to modify their weapons. Only Israel is allowed to modify American weapons. And so why is that? Because Israel takes American technologies like these weapons, like anti-missiles and missile technologies from the US. They quote unquote modify them, and then they sell them to countries like India and whatever, Brazil and so on. They sometimes arm both sides of the conflict, like in Sudan, North Sudan versus South Sudan. Israel armed both in this war, and in many places in the world, they can sell their arms to both sides because they profit from war. And they compete with American weapons manufacturers. This is the other irony of it. Selling basically American technologies repackaged as so-called Israeli technologies. This is the reality now. This is what it is. It is no longer the US as this imperial power, and that there are countries that do whatever the US tells them to do. No, Israel actually runs the foreign policy of the United States and runs its everything, and even competes with the arms industries in the US. I know many people within the Pentagon who are not happy about that. Some have resigned from the State Department or the Pentagon. But this is what we have. There's a Zionist lobby that shapes American foreign policy, that controls a lot of the American wealth, that manages a lot of the media in the US, that ensures the American public votes in certain ways, like they just did with Jamal Bowman defeat in New York in the primaries. And they're now going, they defeated Cynthia McKinney and others, So they are working, they're working hard. They're spending $100 million just this year on elections in the US. Nobody can come up with $100 million on the other. Imagine if China put $100 million with Chinese American money, if you want, or others, to basically defeat candidates in the US that are considered unfriendly to China. There would be an uproar on this. But Israel is doing that, Zionists are doing this, and they are getting away with it.
Again, that's a very good response. Do we have any other hand or comments from our people here? Gail, was that a good answer, a good response for you?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Thank you so much. At one time, was it Thomas who asked for more time on this? What else do you want to add upon this for Mazin to hear?
Just
Is Thomas still there?
before Thomas,
Yes.
I put
Mazin.
an email in the chat room,
Yes.
Qumsiyeh.org. Please, if anybody wants to join our email list, and those
Yeah.
of you already on the email list have already testified, they receive it, like Peter and others. So you can join our email list, just email me. Go ahead, sorry.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mazin.
Yeah.
We are almost close to time, but Thomas, you had something to add. Please welcome
Well,
Thomas.
I just want to thank Mazin again for his brilliant presentation. The last thing about the weapons and so on is vital. We're mostly scholars here and academics, and you live in Bethlehem. There's a university in Bethlehem. I've been utterly appalled at the killing of, you mentioned 145 journalists. I think there's been about 130 academics in Gaza killed or deliberately, and the university's blown up, the libraries, I think we should be making more noise as academics through things like, well, I don't know, through all the leverage we can access through our universities to protest against this. It's called educide. How can we help the Palestinian academic community? Do you teach at Bethlehem University? Have you got links there? I think this is just appalling and we should be making more noise. What can we do?
I agree with you 100%. So that's a good thing that this is kind of coming to the end with that kind of question is action oriented, what we should do to combat not just the genocide, but the ecocide, the educide, as you said, and the scholasticide that is happening in Gaza. And, it's appalling and destruction of healthcare. You are right. I mean, the universities, they targeted intentionally the academics. I lost actually 3 people I know who are academics in Gaza. They were killed with their families, entire families. This is appalling, including one Christian friend of mine, who's an academic there, Marwan Tarazi. So there is this ongoing onslaught on everything that has to do with life in Gaza, healthcare, education, etc. And actually, in journalists, actually at a higher percentage, if you look at percentage of academics who are killed versus percentage of the total civilian population killed, it's a much higher percentage. So Israel is intentionally killing academics, killing journalists, killing healthcare workers, because these are the people who make society function. And they want to destroy society, and it's a cheaper way to kill those people and then have no functioning society. So people will be forced to leave, and you don't have to kill them outright, hundreds of thousands. But it's not working for them, so they are with starvation and famine, they are killing everybody. So back to your question, what can we do? I mean, we started this Gaza Virtual University. We have a group of people that are helping graduate from different universities in the West Bank and abroad, like the American University of Beirut. If you email me, I'll be happy to send you details on these things. Some activities that we are doing, even today, I was meeting with some people in Gaza, academics who were interested in agriculture and the destruction of 50% of the agricultural fields in Gaza, and how we can do remediation, and stuff like. We were brainstorming basically on remediation on food sovereignty, things like that with these academics. There's a lot that can be done. Individuals like you and everybody on this list, on this call, can certainly get engaged in whatever field of interest they have, whether it's education or healthcare or media or lobbying or whatever, they can be engaged with that. You can also go to my website, Qumsiyeh.org, and on the front page, there's what you can do, 76 things that you can do. And so people can do a lot. I feel that there's more and more people getting engaged, and the movement is growing, a global uprising, if you want to call it that, global intifada. I think it's happening. I think we all need to be part of this movement because, as I articulated earlier, it is an existential thing, not just for Palestinians, but for the whole world. And I think each of us has...
Professor Mazin, if I may interrupt for a
Sure.
little while. Our time is almost up, but we still have one hand from Reverend Judith. If we can listen to this and let it come to an end before we wind up. Thank you so much, Reverend. Welcome.
Thanks. Mazin, there is a question in the chat too about how to get to the list of how we can help. But also I was wondering if you could just talk directly to the effect of the war on the ecology, the statistics about the ecocide in Gaza.
Well, I covered this when I talked about the examples like diversion of the water of the Jordan River, like the destruction of trees in Gaza. I mentioned 50% of agricultural fields were plowed, were destroyed. The plant cover in Gaza is now 70% reduced. I mentioned the jet fuels and their impact on climate change.
Yes.
But you can imagine, I wrote a paper actually about this. You can go on our website, which is palestinenature.org, and see our papers under research. So I'll put it in the chat room. palestinenature.org. And /research, and you can get our research about these things like the environmental impact, etc.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mazin. And Reverend Julia, as Professor said, we can get all this information from the website. Let us visit the website and also help a hand in, let us give a hand to Palestine and Israel and all the world. We're all involved in this as scholars, as peace builders. Please let us all get involved. And our time is up, but before we close, I would like to welcome Dr. George to give us an insight for the next week, and appreciate all our presenters for today and the previous and the coming ones. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bethlehem, for this wonderful moderation. Thank you, Mazin, for this brilliant presentation. You've learned quite a lot. And for me, the takeaway is how to become more human. And I think this is a challenge for everybody. And I thank everyone on this call for your participation. We are looking forward to seeing you all next week, every Wednesday. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, George. Bye.
Thank you.